Hey everybody, Mark from Rams Up here, and I have Paul Walia and Tom Courts back. We haven't done this in a while, and we are going to cover all things Rams today. We have a little outline that we're going to try to follow here. We'll probably go off on tangents, we always do, but what we're going to try to do here is the first thing we're going to try to do is look back at the 2022 season, and then we're going to look forward at the 2023 season. Hey, Paul, how you doing? You got your Georgia Bulldog shirt on? Is that what I see?
Oh yeah, paying homage to the national champions, SEC pride, and shout out to all and obviously this is for Matthew Stafford really, and for the rest of the Ramily, that for example, Darion Kendrick, and I know Ernest Jones is from Georgia as well. It's been a rough season, so figure I'd pay a little tribute to the national champs.
A year from now, maybe you'll be sporting a USC polo shirt in
Oh,
honor of
dare to dream, dare
the
to dream.
Trojans championship. Hey,
Hey,
Tom, what's going on with you? Oh, go ahead, Paul. What's that?
some of the greatest Ram football, John Robinson days.
Oh, yeah, right. Um, and Tom, how are you? What are you up to?
Oh, hey, how's it going? No, just enjoying watching some playoffs without being in them. A little bit, obviously, it's a little different feeling. So, just enjoying watching football as a fan and not worried about everything Rams at this time of the year. So it's a little glass 1/10 full. I won't say it's half full, but
Yeah,
yeah.
it's funny how I find myself losing interest. I was watching UCLA basketball yesterday, and the game ended, and then I was like, "Oh wait, I think there's a football game starting about now." And this will be another year I'll go golfing on Super Bowl Sunday, the best golf year. If you're golfers, that's a hot tip for you. You can get on really nice courses, sometimes at a discount, and it's wide open. So, hey, let's get started on this. So, the first one we wanted to talk about is obviously we're going to look back. Well, let's start with some hot news that might be cooking in the background here. We can't ignore some of the stuff going on with the Rams. And so, what's your take, Tom? I'll start with you. Who's going to be the Rams' next offensive coordinator? Do you have any inside information on that?
I do. I actually, McVay and I have been chatting. It's going to be Matt LaFleur. It's just a matter of time until he announces it. No, I'm
Mike
kidding.
LaFleur?
I mean, Mike LaFleur. Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't, of course I don't have inside information. I just think that's where they're headed. I think it's a good fit for them. And I don't see Reich as a good fit, but that's my personal opinion.
Well, I saw they're interviewing. Is it Joshua? I don't know. I'm not even sure how to pronounce his last name. Is it Alton?
Yeah.
The Broncos. You think
Yeah.
that's just not a serious interview, or they're just doing their due diligence?
That was one of the roughest offenses I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, that's true.
So I don't know. Maybe they're doing due diligence. Who knows? I think LaFleur is the outside favorite though.
And hey, Paul, what do you think's going on with this Jalen Ramsey talk? I gave Tom a homework assignment before this to talk about Jalen Ramsey's contract, but do you think there's any truth to this rumor that the Rams are moving on from him? I have my opinion, but what do you think's going on here?
I think after the Tyreek Hill trade, I think that's why you're starting to see all the Jalen Ramsey talk. I think there's very comparable scenarios. But personally, I think trading Jalen Ramsey would be a mistake. I know it's a rough cap hit, but listen, especially if you take a look at the way the NFL is played now and the difficulties teams are having playing man-man coverage with all these layered crossing routes, which are really problematic for defenses. I think someone like Jalen Ramsey is invaluable. I think he's going to stick around. I think the Rams are aware of that. Unless they get an offer that is just absolutely off the charts, he'll be around.
What did you find out, Tom, as far as the cap hit? I looked at Spot Track and
it's almost $20 million, $19.6 million of dead money that they've already paid him in bonuses, and then his salary this year would be, I think, 17 million to the team that got him. So
is this all just because of his one tweet Is that the only data we have on him on the Rams supposedly moving on from Jalen Ramsey? Is there any other facts behind this?
I think that people were thinking about it, including at least I can speak for myself, me. Wonder if they could get something for Jalen now, in case that he declines any further or plays more poorly in the future. But so I think it was on people's minds, and then when they saw the tweet, it kind of solidified some of those opinions. I, for one, agree with Paul wholeheartedly on this. That if they get a couple of firsts and a second or some crazy offer, they'll take it. But otherwise, I just don't know what they would do in terms of filling that spot. It would not only cost them if they were to sign, say, a free agent, which they would almost absolutely have to. I don't think Kobe Durant is our cornerback one going into next season.
Right.
So they're going to have to sign somebody, and that would cost them their number one comp pick, most certainly, if they sign somebody of any value. So there's a lot going on here. $20 million in dead cap, a comp pick loss if you sign a big free agent cornerback, and it just all starts to add up to. Plus, the fact they're not going to probably even replace Jalen Ramsey in terms of skill and what he brings to the table. So
yeah,
I'm with Paul. Unless it's a monster offer, I don't think he's going anywhere.
Yeah, I think Jalen Ramsey, when he's focused and on his game, he's still one of the top defenders in the league. He had a couple breakdowns during this past season, but I sure hope he sticks around.
Yeah, let's also note that we know he hurt both of his shoulders in the Super Bowl year, played through both of those injuries. That's why he didn't look so good in the playoffs, or at least one of the reasons. And then in the offseason this last year, he had surgery on one of his shoulders, but not the other, and it was the same injury on both. This year, the other one wasn't as bad. He played through that this year, and it got worse. So now he's having surgery on that shoulder to fix that shoulder. So he'll be coming back, and the fact that he played at the end of the season and played as well as he did, along next to Bobby Wags, was pretty impressive as well. So got to hand it to the guy. He was one of the veterans that he could have very easily with that shoulder said, just sit out the rest of the year, but he played through it. So give him a lot of props for that.
Can we talk about the Rams OC position for a second?
Yeah.
Sure.
This fantastic breeding ground for the NFL. So let's take a look. Matt LaFleur, Green Bay head coach, Rams OC. Coach O'Connell did a great job once again. Rams OC. Zach Taylor, Bengals, Rams OC. What about this?
Corey, I don't think he was ever Rams OC, right?
He was like he was technically their quarterback coach.
Yeah. But he never. Yeah, it was interesting to me that he never made it all the way up to.
He got hired right off of that because the way the Rams use their quarterback coach is almost like a quasi offensive coordinator. But I'm thinking, well, let's throw this out there. They're buddies, right? Kingsbury coming in as OC. McVay.
Yeah, I thought about that. Yeah.
Can you imagine? That's like playing Madden in the NFL. Right. Those two together. I would not want to be in a room with them because that would be like dizzying to hear those two talking. But it's a very real possibility. He could get Cliff to come over. But one thing I will say, if you take a look at what the Rams have, so they got LaFleur, they got Zach Robinson, who's a hot ticket, right?
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of jobs. You have Thomas Brown, who I honestly think is going to get. I think he's going to get an OC position. I think he's going to get the Washington position, and they still have Greg Olson. So I think he is, and that's what they do. They try to amass a lot of these young assistants. So I think they have a feeling that they're going to lose at least one of these guys. I think that's why LaFleur is there. But I also think this O-line scenario is so frustrating for McVay. I'm going to go out on a limb. I think they're going to pull Bill Callahan away. I think he's going to give him the assistant head coach O-line position for the Rams. They're really tight. I think if I was McVay, I would be so frustrated with the way the O-line and the running game has been over the last years. I would roll it that way. I think he's going to draw Callahan out. And I think the OC position is going to fall to who's ever left between Robinson and Brown. I think LaFleur is going to get the quarterback spot. But LaFleur,
interesting.
Yeah, I think he's definitely another very bright mind, even though I know he got ripped apart here in New York for his work with the Jets. But I think it's going to be a very interesting play, the way that the OC position plays out for the Rams.
Yeah, it's interesting that Zach Robinson has now a second interview for OC position. I think one of them was the Ravens, and then there was just another one announced. And Thomas Brown's actually interviewing for head coaching jobs. I think certainly with Houston, and so it'll be interesting to see. And I wonder if they will go in house there, or if they'll bring somebody in externally. I don't think LaFleur would come over would take as an OC and with the Jets. I don't think he's going to go take a step back. He's going to want to OC somewhere if he can. It'll be interesting to see. And then, of course, it's another thing to note is that there's no comp picks associated with a player like, say, a coach like Thomas Brown taking an OC job. Rams only get comp picks if they lose somebody, a minority coach who becomes a head coach. So, obviously Thomas Brown as a head coach to Houston would accomplish that.
Hey, let's talk about what we can be happy about this past season. Let's look back, and I know it was a pretty a dismal affair for the most part, but there were a few things that I think are worth highlighting that Ram fans should be happy about, should be optimistic about. And I'll start it off. I got a list here. We're probably not going to touch on all of them, but the one thing that the one takeaway from this season, personnel wise, is how about the performance of Michael Hoyt this year? This is a guy that he's a 300-pound defensive lineman, or at least so I thought. And next thing you know, he's playing on the edge, playing outside. And he really became an impact player really fast.
Yeah, he played. When you stand up somebody who's 300 pounds and they, 4.5 sacks, it's not bad in limited playing time, and came from Brown, right? So smart kid. But listen, I think if you take a look at the Rams D line as a whole, I think you bring up a good point. Bobby Brown in limited play looked good, right? Copeland looked good moving forward. So I think that position you get a little bit more depth. So I love the way this kid played. Hoyt, the way they described him, all gas, no brakes. When Raheem Morris said that at the press conference, I thought that was awesome. But it brings a lot of flexibility. Listen, what killed the Rams was lack of pass rush. It was abysmal. They had no one apart from Donald. Donald was getting triple team, and the Rams were still able to get pressure on the quarterback. So, So any pass rush from this roster is going to be very welcome.
Do you think the performance of Brown, Copeland, and I guess Hoyt is kind of related to this, but do you think that would suggest that the Rams are not going to bring back Sean or Greg Gaines? Does anyone have an opinion on that?
That's a tough call. And Tom, let me know what you think as well, because I'll tell you this, the way they have it priced out, if you take a look at some of these sites, they're saying A'Shawn Robinson's going to get $9 million. I'm doubtful A'Shawn Robinson's going to get $9 million, but you never know. Greg Gaines came up with 4 sacks or 4.5 sacks this year, so that's 2 years in a row. He's at 4 sacks, so that's pretty good. Greg Gaines did get moved off the ball much more frequently this year in the run game. Which is not good to see for someone of his position. But having said that, we'll see. I would love to see A'Shawn Robinson stay. He's one of the best run defenders I think the Rams have ever had. He plays that spot and allows everyone else to freelance a little bit. So that's something definitely you have to take into consideration. But, cap room is a premium.
So, Tom, what is if there's one thing, one or two things Ram fans should be happy about looking forward, looking back last year that, promising for the future that you saw from this Rams 2022 team?
Yeah, we learned a lot, and we get to do it. There's quite a few things, but the thing that that really struck me. It was nice to see Tutu Atwell get out there and know that he can be productive in the passing game, and his head's in it. We learned that Cam Akers can be a number one back if he gets touches and doesn't gets primary carries, which he's said all along and what he was so tweaked about. Ben Skoranek can actually catch the ball and be a super productive wide receiver, and even that swing into the fullback position. We learned about the hard way. We learned about some offensive linemen that that can be productive into the future. Larry Jackson, Tremaine Ingram, AJR Curry, Chandler Brewer, that can help out. Unfortunately, we also learned that Joseph Nopum is not a quality starting left tackle, unfortunately. So, yeah, we learned a lot. Bobby Wagner can still play at a very high level. Yeah, there's a lot we learned, but, it was all based upon, or a lot of it was based upon the fact that there were injuries, and we got to see some players that we otherwise might not have seen really step up and do a good job. We also learned a lot. It's actually a positive about who can't play and who we can't rely on in backup roles, including our two backup quarterbacks who are not ready for prime time.
Right.
Thankfully, they didn't go down in a situation. Thankfully, Stafford didn't go down in a situation where the Rams were really sniffing at a playoff run and had to rely on those guys. That would have been disastrous.
Yeah,
it was great to see Leonard Floyd turning on at the end of the season, because he was clearly not healthy in the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
So another Georgia Bulldog, shout out to him, but he was definitely not healthy in the beginning of the season. But to see him turn it on at the end of the season and see that 54 back to him, to his whole self, was, for me, a major positive. And got to shout out Mark. Good call on Kobe Durant. He definitely looks like a slot.
He disappeared for a little bit there, but I think he's the type of player. I'm not sure, how. I'm not going to call him a great cornerback yet, but he does seem to have a knack for making big plays. When he gets the ball in his hands, he's more dangerous than, let's say, Jalen Ramsey with the ball in his hands. So that's nice. It's nice to have guys like that just have a knack for the big splash plays when you need them.
And for everyone in Ram Nation that's watching, that was Mark's favorite player. That was the player that he cited after the draft that he said was going to blow up for the Rams. So good call on that one, Mark.
Yeah, and I used basically no data, no information, just a gut feeling. Reading a few comments about him, I can't take a lot of credit for that. Kind of just took a wild ass guess there, and I happened to be right. Is there any? Looking at my notes here, what about the offensive line? Is there one guy on the offensive line that you think maybe we didn't think could be a starter, but could help solve our offensive line problems next year? You mentioned Alaric Jackson, Tom.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he looked really good, and when he stepped in for no.
Did you see his tweets? And I believe it was verified as being him, right? Did you see that, Paul, where he was tweeting about what he thinks the offensive line should look like next year?
I didn't catch that one. No.
Yeah, he was very outspoken about what he thought the starting offensive line should be, and then he gave a second round of them, and he told anybody if they hurt anybody's feelings, then they should just start to play better. So I loved it. He became one of my favorite Rams when he did that. I'd love to see every player state their opinions more.
Who were his five? So who were his five? I'm curious.
He
had a couple of options, right, Tom? I think he had himself at left tackle, though.
Yeah, he had himself at left tackle. In one case, he had Nopum at left guard. He had Brian Allen at center for both of them, and with Shelton at right guard for in one scenario, Havenstein in there for another, and
Tremaine Ingram. Tremaine Ingram at right guard.
I think. Ingram was in there in one scenario. Shelton was in there for another, and then he had the backups. He listed the backups also, and Logan Bruss wasn't in there on any of them, just because he probably just means. And I think he did clarify that just because he was hurt. But yeah, and obviously Havenstein was in there at right tackle on all of them. But nothing earth shattering. other than he wants to play left tackle. And he also said that the wages for or the salaries for these different players should be adjusted based upon their contributions. So it'll be it was fun. It was fun.
Well,
fodder.
he's playing on an undrafted free agent, undrafted rookie contract, right? And he could be the Rams' starting left tackle. So I understand where he's coming from.
That would be awesome, no?
Yeah.
Yeah. The only disagreement I have with him is that I think Coleman Shelton is a much better center than Brian Allen.
Absolutely.
And it was interesting to see a guy like that who was clearly being brutally honest with his opinions, who's in that room and on that field with these guys every day, believing that Brian Allen is our starting center in both of his scenarios going forward. That was the biggest takeaway to me.
Yeah, and I think if you've listened to the podcast recently or any of my videos, I have been an advocate for all along that the only issue we have to solve along the offensive line who is the left tackle. I think we have enough bodies, enough players there if everybody comes back healthy to have a decent offensive line. Not a great offensive line, but a good enough offensive line as long as a Lyric Jackson or Noteboom or somebody else can man that left tackle position adequately. I think that's the only major concern I have. But you guys disagree with that, or you're have any differing view on that?
It's good to see Lyric Jackson tweeting out because remember he went out on a medical scenario, blood clot issues. So that was sort of scary, right? So the fact that he's actively tweeting, that's a good sign. I think for the Rams O-line, I think the Rams learned a valuable lesson when Corbett was allowed to walk. Is that listen, if you want to be a passing team, and you want to go empty sets and all this, pass protection is at a premium. Yeah, that's not an area where that you need to get, sort of try to conserve resources, money, whatever it is. That's where you have to go for a premium. So I think moving forward, and I think Alaric Jackson brings up a good point. You know what it is? You open it up to as much competition as humanly possible. And the person that shows you that they can play at a consistent level on a weekly basis, that's who gets the job. So listen, you gave the contract to Noteboom. Listen, that's done. Now the decision is, which best five at whatever scenarios. If Noteboom's going to be the left guard, so be it. If he's going to be the left tackle, so be it. He's a quality player. But the players that can hold it down, listen, Stafford got mangled this year. That was a vicious injury. He took some, and this is 2 years in a row. He's taken some really, really monster hits. If they want their quarterback to survive, they can't. This is not the way to approach it. You got to put the best players out there. Left tackle is a premium spot in the NFL for a reason. They learned that the hard way. But the Rams have now some quality depth. I know he only started one game, but AJ Curry looked like he could play. He looked, his footwork looked good. His consistency was there. We saw the whole thing with Jackson. He looked great. He looked fantastic when he was out there. I love Coleman. I think he's a great player as well. So it just adds to the Rams' depth. If Logan Bruss can live up to 80% of his draft sort of reviews, that's just another bonus. And they can bring in another player, another quality veteran as well, without blowing up the salary cap. That's another bonus. So there are a lot of positives in the O-line room, but they have to ask themselves, it's 2 years in a row, why are we having trouble getting healthy? Why are we having trouble staying healthy for the whole season?
And then Kevin Carver, if you guys remember last year, he was protected by McVay. He was thought of as a top coach on that staff, and he was not allowed to interview for other jobs unless it was a OC job, which a lot of offensive linemen, a lot of coaches don't get. So they didn't let him interview and take more money. They protected him. Was one of the few coaches they did that to, meaning that they really liked him. Obviously, did a great job with the Whitworth crew in the Super Bowl year. But and then they fire him. So they go from one of the few that's protected, to firing him. And thought that was interesting. And I think it's because he's probably the one that said Joseph Noteboom can play this position. And he stepped up and he said that, right? I mean, he didn't do a bad job with guys like Jackson and Ankrum and other guys. Really Cope Brewer, a host of other guys coaching him up. But I feel like Carberry went down for the Noteboom decision.
Hey, let's move on. Go ahead.
As an O-line assistant, that would be fun too.
Hey, let's move on to the disappointing things, and we could spend an hour on that. So let's just try to highlight the things that were most disappointing. And you already mentioned it, Tom. I was never comfortable with our backup quarterbacks, and that turned out to be the case. Our backup quarterbacks were not up to the task, neither one of them, in my opinion. And you see some of these other teams, you see these backup quarterbacks just step in and be very, very productive. And the Rams backups, until they got Baker Mayfield, he had a couple of moments, but I don't know. That was probably the most disappointing thing. And then you already mentioned this as well. I think Tom or Paul mentioned this. It took them so long to get Tutu Atwell involved, and I think that's a very, very promising for the future. But it's still really frustrating that he just wasn't getting targets. Really, wasn't even getting snaps in a lot of games. So those are the two things I would say were most disappointing for me as a Rams fan.
Yeah, go ahead.
How about you?
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah. So for me, I mean that right edge spot where we went with Hollins and Lewis, and both of those guys just were terrible. I mean, let's just face it. And they can't even barely get snaps. Lewis couldn't make another team, and Hollins barely got snaps on probably the most decimated offensive or defensive line in the league with some backup snaps with Green Bay. And so that to me has to be, I mean, if you have two guys that you think are going to hold down an edge spot in that defense where you have to get pressure with four, and they could get no pressure at all. Obviously Leonard Floyd being hurt on the other side didn't help. That crashed the season from the beginning. Obviously, we can talk about injuries, but on the offensive line, but that was just poor scouting, poor performance. That was pure coaching that couldn't identify that was going to happen. If you don't know that those guys are going to be that bad, two guys, forget one guy, two guys can't make it work. That's awful. And now going back to the quarterback situation, Mark, I feel like it's a little revisionist history to say we didn't know Wolford couldn't play, right? Because the last time we saw him play, he played really well, and he beat out Jared Goff, our number one draft pick, Super Bowl quarterback, for that job when Goff was healthy in that Seattle playoff game a few years back. So from my perspective, I thought Wolford could play. I was touting him when he was going to step in for Stafford in I guess he stepped in week 11. In week 10. Then I thought he was going to play, and when he couldn't play, I was dumbfounded. I was like, "Wow, this isn't what I remember." So, that was extremely disappointing. Those are probably the two biggest disappointments. And then we already talked about Noteboom, and that's got to be right up there when we thought we had a left tackle and we don't. So, pretty important positions, right? Quarterback, left tackle, and right edge. Pretty nasty.
What about you, Paul?
I would say there were so many disappointments, but if my biggest disappointment was really goes Rams coaching staff, the inability to protect Stafford and Kupp. That I'm not going to say they allowed these players to get injured, but they put them in a scenario that, Stafford. I mean, he's your franchise quarterback. So, and then Cooper Kupp being, rolled out there week in, week out, just basically by himself. So I just think that there was a great deal I saw a lack of creativity. I saw a lack of inability to really change the game plan, to really protect those two guys, and eventually it played itself out. We saw, and everybody said it every week, it's a matter of time before they're going to get KO'd. So the Rams are very fortunate that those players didn't have career-ending injuries. So to me, that was really, really disappointing. I think they could have done a better job protecting those two guys. I also think they gave up on the season a little too early. If you look at the NFC teams that made the playoffs, yeah, 2 500s basically made the playoffs.
Right.
So I think we gave up on the season a little too early. I think we could have fought our way. Whether or not we would have won the Super Bowl, that's it's a different discussion altogether. But I think we could have edged out a playoff spot.
Yeah, I think that losing that game in Tampa Bay at the end there was that was really big. That really hurt our chances of really making a playoff push. And that could have been turned out a lot differently if the Rams had held on in that game. And
we were 3-3 going into the bye. Think about that. And then those 5 L's after that, that's what killed the season, really.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, we could go on that subject. Let's move on let's take a quick look through. I don't think we need to spend a bunch of time on this. Well, let's take a quick look at this draft class. Logan Bruss, we can only hope that he comes back and pushes for a starting job. We can't assess him at all at this point, I think. Kobe Durant, I think he showed that he's an NFL caliber cornerback. Not sure how good, but promising. Kyren Williams is an interesting case. He's also listed in my upcoming. In a moment here, we'll talk about our mystery players, and Kyren Williams is one of them. He started to get some snaps, and then he disappeared again. And I don't know if it was because of Cam Akers, the urgency about getting Cam Akers more touches. What do you think, Paul? Is Kyren Williams an NFL rotational back? Do we still hold out hope for him, or have the Rams seen enough of him? I don't know what to make of Kyren Williams.
So two things. So I think Kobe Durant's going to be the starting slot next year, no question about it. As for Kyren Williams, so one thing I will say, that kid can pass block. He is vicious as a pass blocker, no question about it. He's got incredible potential. He looked good in the limited time that he was out there. He definitely looked good. He definitely lived up to his draft profile. The issue is this an issue? We said this because of his size. Is this an issue again of him not being able to stay healthy? So this is a common theme on this roster. Players not being able to stay healthy. Listen, you have to be available. Ability is one thing, but you have to be available in the NFL, and that's something to keep at. But I think he will definitely get a shot. He looks really a nice complementary back in all phases of the game. He can catch the ball. He runs tough. He has good instincts. And like I said, a vicious pass blocker. So I think as a complementary back, I think he would fit in nicely. I think they're going to give him another shot. I think he's going to surprise a lot of people next year, but he's got to be able to stay healthy.
Yeah, how do you feel about him, Tom?
Yeah, unfortunately, he went down and he was out week 2 through week 9, and he missed 7 games, and so that was not good for a rookie to try to get in the flow of things. But I think they've found their way. It's another positive from the season. We learned, like I mentioned before, that Cam Akers as a primary back can be very effective, and if he gets a better offensive line, he'll be that much more effective. He's much more engaged. I don't think they're going to do the share the snaps thing anymore. Cam will be primary, and then you get Kyren as a prototypical third down back. He's pass pro. He's pass pro. He catches the ball well, and I think they have their I think they figured that out, and I think that's really good because for 2 years.
Yeah, I was just concerned because they seemed to move away from him in the last couple of games when I thought they would be, hey, let's give Kyren 15 carries and see what he can do, and that never happened. So that's what confused me.
Well, it's because they learned that Cam Akers is effective apparently only when he gets primary snaps.
Yeah, but I'd still at that point in week 17, week 18, I know you still want to win, especially that Seattle game because it's important. It's a divisional rival, but I think it might be more. I thought it might be more valuable for the Rams coaching staff to see Kyren get the carries, but I guess I'm wrong on that. That's what I was expecting to see, and I just never saw it.
You were saying, like, let's see what the kid can do. Let's give him the rock.
Right.
But Cam Akers did heat up the last 4 games of the season.
No, he did. And I think if the goal is the W, I'd roll with Cam Akers too. So I could see it both ways. I don't know what the Rams' mindset on that is. If there's another reason they're not rolling with Kyren Williams the last 2 or 3 weeks.
I think that's the theme for the 2022 season. Was what was the Rams' mindset from a lot of
right.
So the failure of the running game did coincide with the fact that the running game was nothing against Hendo, the D-line coach, who's a phenomenal defensive coach. He was the run game coordinator, and then the last 4 or 5 games of the season, and if I'm not mistaken, Thomas Brown was told to work with the running backs again. And all of a sudden, Cam Akers explodes. So once again, was that something like McVay once again not being like really into the running game, or whatever it was, an oversight played itself out huge for the Rams, because their lack of a running game really, really came back to haunt them.
The next guy on this rookie list, Quentin Lake. I don't think we've seen enough of him either. I think he's definitely going to be on this roster next year. I don't know what more we can say about him at this point. That's still an incomplete grade in my book. Darion Kendrick, I don't know. Early on, Tom, you saw him, you liked him, and he looked good. And then he looks like the Rams kind of lost faith in him. He had a couple really rough games. Does he have a future on this roster, you think? Or
yeah, I do. Darion Kendrick is. We got to remember he was a 6th-round pick for a reason, coming out of a starting cornerback job on a national championship Georgia Bulldogs team, and he goes in the 6th round. So the reason is because of his speed, right? And he's very aggressive, and he is the kind of cornerback that can play in the Rams. It's a perfect example, actually, of what it means to the secondary if the front 4 or 5 can get pressure, and if they can't. Like, he got torched when we couldn't get any pressure on the quarterback, because he's assuming these pieces work together, and the secondary is relying on pressure to get there and playing deep. Obviously, that's what so many Rams fans are so frustrated with. And then they play deep, and they play downhill and read things in this match zones. It looks like a zone, then it turns into a match zone, but it's all reliant on that pressure. And if the Rams let somebody sit back there for ages, a guy like Darion Kendrick's just going to get beat over the top, and that's what happened to him a few times. So anyway, if the Rams can get back to the year before, when we were able to get pressure with 4 and the occasional blitz and so forth off the edges, Darion Kendrick can be an effective cornerback for us. If not, then he's certainly not a man cornerback, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's just more of a case of just finding the right role for him and the right situation where he can his talents can be put to use the most, I guess. And this past season, it wasn't really working in his favor. There are a lot of other issues going on with this, Steve. We haven't talked about the so-called soft coverage strategy of Raheem Morris. A lot of people had an issue with, and that may have not been playing to his strengths either, perhaps.
But I think he matches what the draft profile pegged him for. So he was susceptible to double moves. He was susceptible over the top. If the game was in front of him, he played really well. If I'm not mistaken, I think he had over 35 tackles for the season. So he was a much better run defender than people gave him credit for. But once again, when the play was extended, any type of elongated exposure, he was picked on. And there were games where they went his way 3 or 4 times consecutively because they knew that. So
and he's a rookie, so you got to give him some time.
It's not only that he's a rookie. This is a guy who was a healthy scratch weeks 1 and 2, right? In other words, they did not expect this guy to play and contribute. He might have been, if that cornerback room had stayed healthy, he might have been kind of redshirted on the 53, which they do with 1 or 2 players, every year. And in week 3, 4, and 5, Troy Hill, David Long, and Jacoby Durant were all out due to injury.
Right.
So he gets thrust in there after literally not being on the 48. He gets thrust into a starting role in week 3 as a rookie.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, that's asking a lot. And he sat there, and I think he did admirably well, considering the circumstances. And so I don't know. I give the guy a pass.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Daniel Hardy, I think we give an incomplete grade on him. He got some snaps, I think, in week 17 and 18. So maybe there's some hope for him, or is he just going to be Chris Garrett, another version of Chris Garrett, where he kind of hangs around for a couple of years? We'll have to see. Russ Yeast, he got some playing time. I think he played well. He didn't,
He did.
Jump off the stat sheet or anything, but with a couple of free agent safeties, unrestricted free agent safeties, Russ Yeast could be competing with Jordan Fuller and a couple other guys, right?
Quentin
Russ
Lake.
Yeast,
Yeah.
Pardon?
Quentin Lake. Yeah.
Quentin Lake. Oh yeah, we skipped Quentin Lake. Quentin Lake and Russ Yeast, 2 rookie safeties. So Russ Yeast, do you guys think he's a player? You think he's a potential starter for this team?
I think Lake.
I like what I. Go ahead.
I like what I saw with Lake and Yeast. I like what I saw. They were out there. They weren't out there for an extended period of time, but when they were out there, they looked confident. They were instinctive. They played well. They were physical, which is which is the Rams really needed. So the Rams are really, really light in the secondary. You're talking about Kendrick before Tom. For a team, you got 1A, 1B. We definitely need an edge rusher, but we definitely need another boundary defender, right? A tall corner somewhere to play on the opposite of Jalen Ramsey. So we're really, really lacking at that position. So any type of secondary bone for us is huge. So yeah, I like those 2.
Yeah, Yeast was interesting. He was a real. I mean, he was a real physical, like Paul said, but he was to the point where he was a headhunter. Like he did have a couple of, or at least one, personal foul for going at the helmet. But he was very aggressive. So I like the aggressiveness. He seems to be very fast, very quick back there. Something Scott was good at. Rap not so much. So I like Yeast a lot. We didn't see enough of Quentin Lake, but I think I'm not so sure that they're not going to roll with Fuller, Yeast, and Lake next year. I'm not sure. They'll probably draft a safety. They always like to draft safeties. Those guys are great on special teams too. So I don't think they're going to re-sign Nick Scott. I don't think they're going to re-sign Taylor Rapp, and I think they're going to roll with Fuller, Yeast, and Lake.
Fair enough. Yeah, I've been contemplating that a little bit too. Do they have the safeties in house to get this job done with 2 undrafted free agents? And probably only the Rams know the real answer to that. And the last guy is AJ Okuri, and one of you already mentioned that he did get into the week 18 game right and held his own a little bit. I went back and actually watched every one of his snaps. There weren't many, but I did watch them, and he seemed to do okay, hold his own. He's definitely got a future as a backup on this team, I would think.
He's a big boy.
Yeah, and if you can, it's funny how people talk about. Someone was talking about how some of the recent Ram drafts have been so bad, and I pushed back and I said, you get 3 or 4 starters out of a draft. A lot of people think you expect every draft pick to stick with the team and become a starter. And if you go back and look at a lot of teams' drafts over the years, the success rate is not nearly what you think it is. And now this draft, I don't know yet, but I haven't given up on it. I wouldn't give it I give it an incomplete grade at this point. But there are some promising players that could end up really contributing to this team in the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, that's really how a draft has to be evaluated. You have to look at it from a longitudinal scenario, right? So in terms of over a period, let's say of 4 or 5 years, how many roster spots were they able to occupy? How much did they gather a starting role? Did they contribute on special teams? Things of that nature. So I think, it's very difficult to evaluate a draft class. Like you said, I think you hit the nail on the head, right? Just after one season.
Hey, so let's get into our mystery players. I have about 5 listed here, and I'm going to start off with one of Paul's favorite players, and I'll let you ride with what do you want to tell us? What's going on with Robert Rochelle, and what is his future with this team?
Robert Rochelle's future is hopefully on his way out of the SoFi Stadium, leaving SoFi Stadium at exponential speed. He is just, if he could not find his way onto the field in this season with everything that was going on with the Rams, and the Rams, like I said, you have a glaring hole at cornerback, and he could not find any type of real playing time. I just, at this point, I think you have to move on. Listen, he can blow up the combine. We know that, but you got to be able to do it in real time, and he hasn't been such. So,
yeah, I agree with that. That was the number one mystery player for me. Mark was Robert Rochelle. I couldn't obviously the coaches see him in practice and whatnot. Like Paul said, if this guy can't crack a starting, if Darian Kendrick is coming off of is going from never being on a 48-man roster in the NFL to starting a game in the NFL ahead of Robert Rochelle, that tells you everything you need to know. And he didn't get one start. I'm not sure how many snaps he got it.
Haley got more playing time than he did. If you look at it,
Haley got out there a lot.
And I just have to. I'm going to go off on a little tangent here about Robert Rochelle and a couple of other guys. I think this is Russ Yeast as well. And my son, my special assistant, pointed this out to me. Have you noticed how poorly these guys are as gunners on punt coverage? How many times? And it was Rochelle and Yeast were probably the biggest culprits, running full steam ahead past the punt returner and totally taking themselves out of the play. I could never figure it out. But we already talked about Kyron Williams, mystery players we're talking about here. Another one for me is Bryson Hopkins. Tyler Higbee is not going to be here forever. As you mentioned last year, Tom, you thought they might move away from him last year. They could next year as well. And they really, we saw what Bryson Hopkins could do in the playoffs last year. He looked very effective. He's a great blocker. And, he just disappears and doesn't, they were rolling with 2 tight ends at times. And I think he had a couple of targets here and there. But what's the future of Bryson Hopkins on this team? Is what he is, just a kind of a backup tight end that we're going to see once in a while and run situations?
I agree with you. I like Bryson Hopkins. Every time I see him out there, I mean, he definitely looked, and that was the thing, right? Is he going to be physical enough to hold up at tight end? So he definitely looked like a willing blocker. He was definitely much more effective when he was on the move, which doesn't really bode well for him because the Rams generally don't do 2 tight end sets. That's not their thing. They're a single tight end formation. So inline is really where you have to evaluate him as an inline blocker. But 7 receptions, 16-yard average. So he's getting the ball downfield. He looked smooth in his routes, great hands, good speed. I definitely think he is going to be their tight end of the future. I think if you compare Bryson Hopkins with a good physical tight end that could block, how important would have been Johnny Munt if we didn't lose him to Minnesota this year, right?
I know.
Right?
Yeah, and Johnny Munt had more catches this year than he did in his entire
Rams career combined. So I think Bryson Hopkins, if they give him a legitimate shot, as a tight end on the move, I think he'd be great. I think he is a phenomenal talent. I just think, like you said, it's a mystery. He's just underutilized. And he was healthy pretty much for the latter part of the season. He just number wasn't getting called.
How do you feel about Hopkins, Tom?
I think he's great. I mean, he got he got quite a few snaps at the end of the year. He was obviously he was obviously tight end too, but like in that Broncos game, he was out there a lot. They used a lot of 2 tight end sets in that game, and so yeah, I mean something happened he wasn't in week 17 against the Chargers. He didn't play. It doesn't look like something must have been going on, but then he came back, and yeah, I think he's great. I think he'll be our tight end of the future. They may move on from Higbee and go with Hopkins as the number one, and so we'll see. But
I think we'll talk about this in a second here, but I think tight end could be a position we'll target in the draft, though.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. One of the things we're going to talk about, we already touched on it quite a bit already, though, is the coaching situation. A lot of guys could be moving on. A lot of guys already have. And I think the coaching staff is going to look a lot different. And this may be what Les Snead is talking about as far as a remodel, as much as the roster. I don't know if you heard his comment about this isn't a rebuild, this is a remodel, which makes total sense to me. But this, it's a big shakeup in this coaching staff moving forward, and we're not going to sure how it's going to shake out. We will know in a few weeks here, but. What are your thoughts on the coaching staff moving forward, Tom, other than what we've already talked about? Raheem Morris, he may not be back as well, correct?
Yeah, he's getting some interviews as well for head coaching jobs. I mean, the aside, if you don't talk about the assistants, there's 12. There's obviously the head coach, and then there are 12 coordinator / position jobs, or coordinator or 3 coordinator jobs, and then is it nine position jobs. So the Rams, of those 12, they have of the 3 OCs, only one coordinator of the 3 filled, and then they only have 5 of the remaining position jobs filled. So they're essentially of coordinators and position jobs. Think of it this way: there's only 6 of the 12 remaining, and 3 of them are getting heavy interviews for jobs elsewhere. Either coordinator jobs for Zach Robinson, Thomas Brown, or Raheem Morris are getting head coaching jobs. So we might not see the end of this, right? And so there's a lot of jobs for McVay to fill. There's going to be a lot of new blood, and this finally came home to roost, right? Everybody had always asked, in the back of our head, everybody's scratching their head is did these coaching losses affect us, and so forth. There was a lot of promotions internally that maybe shouldn't have been made, and the coaching staff looked like got a little comfortable. Felt like, and maybe it was more the coaches than the players got a little comfortable with their success in the year. So there's a lot of new blood coming in. I don't know how it's going to all shake out, but that's definitely it looks like the coaching staff might be more of a rebuild as opposed to a remodel.
So they low of, I think it's 4 or 5 defensive coaches / assistants. So I think defensively they're sending a message. I think that's important. I think Raheem Morris is going to get a gig somewhere. I think he's earned that right. I think he's a quality coach. I think he interviews well. But I think for the Rams, one of the issues is, so one of the things this year, and not just this year, but whenever the Rams have struggled, is the inability to play complementary football, right? When all 3 phases of the game are not in sync. And we talked about that, like special teams, running game, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When that really hurts you as a team. And I think one of those scenarios that sort of plays into that is when you are in limbo for a month after the season ends or 2 months after the season ends, waiting for who's going to get hired and who's not going to get hired, so you can assemble your team, because that has a trickle-down effect in terms of players that you're evaluating for the draft, free agency, et cetera, what your philosophy is going to be offensively, defensively. And I'll use Liam Cohen as an example. I know he has a very good relationship with Sean McVay. That's why Sean was very excited to bring him in. But you can just see in demeanor in his press conferences, even when he was out there during the games, that there was like this lack of intensity. He's just not like a Sean McVay. He's not an intense, fiery coach. He's very laid back. And you saw that sort of play out in the demeanor of the offense, right? And one glaring characteristic of the Rams this year was they played very poorly down the stretch in the fourth quarter in key situations in games. There were games that were very winnable that they made mistakes, turned the ball over, whatever it may be. That was listen. Hey, you won the Super Bowl a year prior, doing the exact opposite of that, playing very well in key situations. I think this is very purposeful. McVay knew that he had to delegate a little bit more last year. He wanted to do that. That's why he was very purposeful in who he brought in. It didn't work out that well. I think he's going to bring in his guys that he knows that he can count on, and that way he can focus more on what he wants to do, which is to make sure that this offense is humming machine and some of the in-game management scenarios.
Yeah, it's a credit to McVay that he's willing to do this, because maybe as a younger coach, a young guy really, he's more hesitant to do that. And now he sees his coaching career, his legacy maybe at stake a little bit, and says, "I got to do something here, and I'm going to."
If Raheem Morris gets a job, don't be surprised if they bring in Vic Fangio, because the only defense that Vic Fangio's 61 is the one that has been shown to be most effective against his offense. Do not be surprised if he brings him in.
Yeah. We will have I'll have you guys back another time to talk free agency and the draft, but you know, there's free agents that I think we should try to retain, but I don't know that we really can. With the salary cap situation, we're going to have to hope some of these guys step up. I guess one guy I would hope they can retain is Matt Gay. I'd hate to start all over with the kicker, because this year, as bad as everything's gone, Matt Gay has very quietly had a great year, a great 2 years for the Rams, really. Is there any free agent, Tom, that you think the Rams should do everything they can to retain?
The thing with free agents is that there's no benefit other than continuity, right? Other than knowing the system, to retaining your own free agents. And so it's, if you actually, there's an incentive to let them walk, because you get a comp pick when they sign somewhere else.
Yeah.
So it's actually, and that's what the Rams do. They play that arbitrage on the free agency market, and then try and sign guys that aren't unrestricted. They sign guys that have been cut, a la Bobby Wagner, et cetera. And so, in terms of retaining free agents, the only ones that, usually on the offensive line, it's valuable to retain them, because they know that's where continuity matters most, in terms of knowing a system, and language and so forth, working together as a unit. Who would I like them to retain, just from a purely, Greg Gaines? He played through an injury all year. He wasn't as effective as he was the prior year. He's getting that taken care of in the offseason. I love Ashawn. He's just not, if he will get paid. I don't think they'll bring him back. He's just not out on the field enough snaps. He's not an every down back like Gaines is. He doesn't rush the passer. He's purely a defensive stopper. Troy Hill, they'll probably be able to retain him for not very much money, so he'll probably be back. I could take it or leave it, but there aren't that many guys, that are really standout guys that I think need to come back. I really, they'll probably bring back most of these exclusive rights free agents, guys like Hoyd and Gervais, Jacob Harris, Roseboom, et cetera. But after that, in terms of the unrestricted free agents, I don't think there's going to be a lot of these guys that are coming back. Nick Scott's the one that is going to be the biggest question mark that people want back. I don't think they're going to bring him back.
How about you, Tom? Paul?
Yeah, the good news is the Rams don't have a lot of key free agents, which is great. 3 words for Matt Day: clutch, clutch, clutch. So a clutch kicker, you never, ever want to lose a clutch kicker. So just ask Ohio State. So you definitely want to bring back someone like Matt Gay. Troy Hill's interesting. I thought, to me, that was the move of the year for the Rams. That was the steal of the year for the Rams, getting Troy Hill. Whether or not they can bring him back at a decent number, because the Rams have a major issue. They are very short on outside corners. So unless something happens in their, in the free agency market, cornerbacks are extremely expensive to bring in off the free agency market. So that's the major problem that the Rams face. That may play well in Troy Hill's favor. But Ashawn, like Tom said, Ashawn's a question. He's basically a run defender, but he does that really, really well. Can they bring him in on a number? You know what's interesting? I love the fact they had Baker Mayfield as a backup. But how do you bring him in at an affordable number, right? So that's going to be
he's comp pick all the way. He's going to get $8 million somewhere and be a nice, sweet fourth rounder for us. So.
Yeah, do you think anybody sees Baker Mayfield as their starter of the future, though? I'm not sure I see that yet.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know.
I think he's the perfect backup. He's really the perfect backup.
He really is. And if you think about it, if he can get his head right and he can swallow his ego a little bit and say, listen, if I hang around here and hang around with Sean McVay, eventually Stafford's going to move on. I might get this kid, right? And know the system inside and out. But who'll be another great backup? I love this kid from Washington, Taylor Heineke. I think he'd be another great backup for the Rams. But once again, money-wise. But if you look at it, I think Taylor Rapp is gone. Who played well? Ode Ibushi played well.
Yeah,
when I watched him, he played really well. I think he might be back at a decent number. There's some guys that could bring back, but the good thing is I don't really see anybody on here that's like a major player for the Rams that they are at risk of losing, except for Matt Gay. But they have to re-sign Matt Gay. There's no question about it. And Troy Hill, I think it's going to play out well for him because, like I said, think of 3 corners you could bring in off the free agency market for under 10 mil.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, they're
think about that.
This guy'd be great, and then you look at his market value and not so much.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the draft real quickly. Not so much players. We can get into draft prospects another time. We had a lot of fun with that last year with our mock drafts and such. I'm going to tell you the 4 positions I think the Rams should use their first 4 picks on. And again, you're probably going to be in complete disagreement on this, but I think the Rams need to draft a cornerback early to restock that room. I think they need to bring on an edge rusher. Right now they have Leonard Floyd and Michael Hoyt, maybe Daniel Hardy. I think they, with Gaines and Ashawn moving on, we got Bobby Brown, Jonah Williams, number 99, obviously. I think we need to draft a defensive lineman. And I think we need to draft a tight end. And correct, I did not mention offensive line. Now, the Rams will draft an offensive lineman at some point with their 10 picks, maybe 2, but I don't put that as a super high priority unless, if you're at number 36 and there's a really good left tackle there, then maybe. So who wants to go first? What are your 4 draft priorities position-wise?
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, edge is that's where they're going to go for. I think that'll be the first pick. I mean, they're going to have to get somebody that's a highly skilled position in the NFL now, a highly sought after position, and you're going to get the best value early in the draft at that position. It's rare to find a good edge later in the draft, like you could with say an offensive lineman or a safety or something like that. So I think edge is clear and far and away the top priority. Then they're going to start doing what they always do and just restocking the shelves of the position groups that they don't pay. They don't pay corner. They don't pay safeties. They'll probably draft another running back at some point. But the priority being, I say, is edge, cornerback, and I think they are going to and tight end. I agree with that. I think they could. I think it could be surprising. I think they could draft a quarterback relatively early as a backup. And I think that they might be starting to think in those terms. I think they really think. I think they think that Stafford is only going to play 1 more year.
Right. Them. How about you, Paul?
Yeah. So it would be a lot easier if we knew who the coaches were, right? So we knew what philosophies that they were bleeding into. But so I will start by saying, if I were the Rams, I would bring back Nick Scott because I think their secondary is so light as it is.
Yeah, I love Nick Scott.
Yeah, and that leadership, that ability, the glue to hold that secondary together in that system is Nick Scott. And Jordan Fuller has not proven he can even finish a season yet. So I would definitely pay Nick Scott and bring him back. I think they can get him at a decent number. So edge rusher would be my number one priority. It's a lot, everyone in the NFL is looking for edge rusher. There's no way you're going to bring one in free agency without breaking the bank. So that's not going to happen. You're going to have to rely on the draft and bring in some young guns. So I would definitely do edge rusher, but I also look at some pass rush on the D line. Aaron Donald's been basically, the pass rush on the D line. Every now and then Greg Gaines will get some push, but it would be great if we had some D line push, some talented pass rushers on the D line. So I would probably go pass rush edge, pass rush D line. I would definitely go corner. No question about it. Tall corners. The kid from Miami, Stevenson, when we do our draft mocks, we can throw out some names, but there are some good corners with length that are out there that I think would fit in well with the Rams. I think the Rams should also take another. I'm going to say this. I'm going to go out there. It doesn't have to be early, but big physical running back. Once again,
they
right?
haven't had that. Yeah.
Mark and I talk about it all the time. On 3rd and 1, you can't keep calling quarterback seeks. You got to be able to pound it in there, right? So and that's something that you can get. And this kid from UCLA, Charbonnet, I think I like him a lot.
Oh, I do too.
Yep. I think he'd fit in perfectly. But see that we're already getting excited about the draft. And then I would say after that, I always say you can never have enough wide receiver depth. Maybe I would take a flyer on a wide receiver with potential. They have to move on from Brandon Powell. He played, in my opinion, down the stretch. He played terrible. He ran out of bounds a number of times, uncontested. I can't think of the last time he broke one for a big play.
You used to be a big Brandon Powell fan, weren't you? Yeah.
Very different the year prior. This year, I thought with more burn, we would see more of that. He was much more tentative. And he was getting the jet sweep calls much more frequently. But even on the return game, the Rams' return game was really
pretty boring. Yeah. It
so
seemed like there was a lot of times where he was close, but yet so far.
He went down way too easily this year. Too easily this year on tackles in one-on-one scenarios. So I think
our special teams coach was also let go.
Yep. So unless Tutu can show that he can do that, I don't know if he can necessarily do that. Maybe Karen Williams can do that as a nice way to get some more playing time. But they definitely got to get their return game up and running because it was.
Yeah, well, when this offense was in high gear and we were putting up 30 points a game, I was happy with a fair catch. But this past year, we needed something more from the return game. That's
the key, right? Because that translates directly to field position.
Right. So the last thing we can touch on, what's your outlook in 1 or 2 sentences for next year? I'll go first. I think it's just nonsense that this team is in rebuild mode. They just need to get healthy, fill a couple of holes, and I think they'll be in the running. The NFC West will be tough next year. I think Seattle is going to be much improved. They have a lot of draft picks. San Francisco is obviously going to be very good. I think the Rams will be in the hunt for a playoff spot in December. I think Arizona is going to fall off drastically. But I'm already looking forward to next year, and I'm very hopeful that they're going to be a pretty darn good team.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think anybody that thinks this team is not going to be competitive next year doesn't know the roster and so forth. They we have studs, these studs at every position. One thing I want to highlight is that these studs were healthy when it mattered, right? We didn't lose any of our superstars early in the season when we still had hopes of having a good season. Like all of our injuries were to players that weren't our studs, that were the complementary or the role players, if you will, obviously led by that offensive line. But, you think about it, Ramsey and Donald and Stafford and Kupp and, Floyd was a little banged up, but he played every week. And so all of these guys, Havenstein, all these guys stayed healthy. And we didn't, the threat of our team build model right? The risk is when a stud goes down, because now you're just filling him
Like the playoff game in Green Bay where we lost
right.
Donald, and Donald was at 50% and Cooper Kupp couldn't play.
Right, and then you lose Kupp and you lose it. Well, Kupp wasn't considered that back in the first Super Bowl. But anyway, the point to answer your question is that we get all of those guys back. Obviously, you're going to need some luck on the health front, but we certainly learned a lot. We already covered that about this team. So we come back stronger, better, with some of the best players at each position group in the league. Top 5 player in each position group in the league, and arguably the top 1 or 2 or 3, at some of these positions, with Kupp and Donald and so forth. So, no, very optimistic. Now, my thing is, I think we have only one more year of this. So this year I figured last year we had 2 more years of it, and this year was a complete bust. So we have a 1 more year run, and I don't think if we try and push it, it's going to start to fall off. There's 1 more good year with everybody coming back healthy, and that's going to be it. And then it's going to be either a slow tear down or a slow rebuild or a fast one. I'm not sure which one they're going to choose, but it's going to this time next year is going to be a very different conversation, but highly optimistic for next year. I think everybody's all in for 1 more run, and so enjoy it while it lasts.
How about you, Paul?
Yeah, so I definitely think some of the points Tom made, I think, are spot on. One of the things I agree with, I think they're going to go all in for 23. And if you remember when we got together, when we did the cast last time, and we were talking about things like bringing in the honey badger and all this, right? That off season, the mindset was, about running it back. But something happened, like after they signed Bobby Wagner and they got the roster set up, Rams forgot they got to play football, So something happened with that mindset where I think they got comfortable. So I think what's going to happen, I think McVay's going to come back with a vengeance. McVay's the last person you want to get annoyed. So I think, like I said, I think he's going to bring in some of his boys. I think Callahan's going to come over. He's going to find a way to bring Callahan. And if Kingsbury wants to come, I think he's going to bring him over as well. I think they're going to load up. If you look at this roster, how many teams can say they got a Jalen Ramsey, an Aaron Donald, a Matthew Stafford, a Cooper Kupp, all on one roster.
Bobby Wagner,
right? You got Allen Robinson. Hopefully he'll wake up, right? So you got all these things going on. You have enough talent to win. You just got to figure out, and this is the key. Their star players, that sort of gap between their star players and that next level, they have to close that gap. So the key is going to be how the Rams coaching staff, who they identify and how they coach them up to take those ascending roles, like the Bryson Hopkins of the world, who's ever going to take, that right guard position for the Rams, things of that nature. And we didn't even talk about like David Edwards, right? Guys like David Edwards, or young guys like McCutcheon, right? So that's going to be the key in the offseason, is this combination of finding the young guys that are already on the roster that you can count on. Here's the key. You can't just pencil them in like they did this year. They got to show you that you can count on them and that they can deliver. And then augment that. Let's say a really cheap deal. Fletcher Cox comes over, right? A nice friendly deal. If they don't sign Ashawn, if they decide not to go that way, you bring over Fletcher Cox on a deal that's affordable, right? Bring in guys that have that same mindset that want a ring. Start talking about that again. That should be the only thing. Enough with the talk about retirement. Listen, if you don't want to play, don't play. Retire. Go. Move on. Right? Other guys that can do this. But the bottom line is they have to get themselves refocused again, re-energized. I'm excited about the upcoming season. I like the roster. They can bring in, can be strategic. I think they're going to be competitive.
Okay, I think we touched on everything. That was a really good discussion. And what I'd like to do is have you guys back. Maybe we'll do a free agency discussion, and maybe at some point, obviously, talk about the 2023 draft and good stuff. That's always a lot of fun. We can do our mocks like we did last year if you guys are up for it.
That was a great format, by the way.
Yeah,
it
thank
was
you for doing it. Yeah, hey, before we go, I'd love to hear everybody's playoff predictions for today's games and then going forward throughout the playoffs. So, what
well.
do you got, Mark? What are your
This could be embarrassing because a lot of people will hear this and the games will have already been played. But I'm obviously I've never pulled for the Cowboys before, and if I'm going to pull for them, I'm going to pick them. Before the playoffs started a year ago, I said Bill Rams Bengals in the playoffs, and I shared that at work, and I got everybody got a good laugh out of that. And this year, before the playoffs started, I picked Bengals Eagles, so I'm sticking with that.
Nice. Okay.
So I'm sticking with the Eagles to beat whoever wins today. And at home, that's a big advantage for them. And I don't know, there's something about the Bengals. I think they're going to find a way to win. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But that's what I'll roll with.
and who do you have winning it all?
Oh, I'll take the Bengals. And
Nice.
I base that on I'm just guessing. I'm not going to. I don't have any X's or O's or stats or data to back that up. Just a gut feeling, and probably 80% chance I'm going to be completely wrong on that. But that's what I'll roll with.
Paul?
So out of the NFC, for me, it's a no-brainer. I'm going with the Eagles. I think the Cowboys win. I think Eagles and Cowboys. I think the Eagles come out of the NFC. And I got to agree with Mark. I love the conversations that are coming out of the Bengals locker room. They're saying all the right things. And yes, I am totally biased. Yes, Zach Taylor, let's go, boys. I think the Bengals are going to do it. I think the health of Mahomes' ankle, I think, is going to decide that one.
Yeah,
But, yeah, that was huge, right? So I hope he's okay. But I think it's going to. I hate to say this. I think it's going to be Eagles and Bengals. It's going to be clash of the animals.
And you're taking the Eagles, I assume.
You know what? I got to go for Jalen Hurts was my fantasy guy, but Zach Taylor, I don't know. It's a toss up. For me, that's a win-win scenario. So I'm gonna go Eagles Bengals.
And the winner is?
I think Bengals win it at the end.
We're on the same page then. How about you, Tom?
Yeah, I think the Niners win today. Unfortunately, I'll be rooting for the Cowboys, but I do think the Niners are the superior team there. And I think the Bills beat the Bengals today, so we differ on that. I think it'll be a close game, but I think the Bills will find a way to win at home. And I think that the Bills will also beat the Chiefs at a neutral site. I didn't like what I saw yesterday from the Chiefs at all, and I think the Bills are clicking. I think the Eagles beat the Niners in the NFC Championship game, and we get Eagles-Bills in the Super Bowl in Arizona, and I think the Eagles win it. I'm really impressed with that team. That the trench play on both sides of the ball is off the charts, and Jalen Hurts is making all the right decisions. They're running a very simple offense that takes advantage of that offensive line. I love their defense, and I wish we had gotten Bradbury. He's really stepped up for them. They got it clicking in every. You want to talk about complimentary football? That's it. So I think the Eagles are unbeatable at this point in time.
If that was Jalen Hurts at less than 100%, holy cow!
Yeah, right? He didn't obviously run as much as he has been, but he's making great decisions, and that's the most of it. He's very accurate. They're picking their spots. Everything's clicking for that team. That's very impressive. I'm really.
I think an Eagles Bengals or Eagles Bills Super Bowl would be highly entertaining as well. It'd be a lot of fun.
A lot of points are going to be scored.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Hey, thanks a lot. We'll sign off here for now, and I really appreciate your time. Got over an hour of some really good content here, and we'll talk to you. I'll talk to you both real soon. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Thanks for your time, guys.
Thank you.
All right.